Good evening, and thank you for coming. I really want to thank all of you for choosing to spend your evening here tonight. I have to tell you, as evenings out go, I know listening to a politician speak isn't exactly box seats at the Calgary Flames at the Saddle Dome. I do understand that, so I appreciate you coming out. I want to thank you for your patience also. When we rescheduled this event, because of the tragic and unexpected death of Manmeet Bhullar, he was taken at a far too young age, and we really appreciate you changing your schedule to be here tonight. Thank you. A little over 3 weeks ago at the Wildrose annual general meeting, I challenged our members to think differently about the future of our party. Tonight, I'm going to issue the same challenge to you. I'll talk a bit about why I think getting the right people together matters to us and to all Albertans. I will also take some time to talk about job losses, the state of the economy, and Bill 6, both in terms of it being problematic legislation and in terms of what it tells us about how the NDP will approach issues. And we'll also set some time aside at the end for some interactive questions and answers. And that's because we want to hear from you so we know what to expect in the future when we have the great privilege of managing the economy of this incredible province and what your priorities are for our province. In particular, I mean that I will ask you some questions and I will invite you to consider some of the problems and conundrums that worry me. But first, let me set the stage for where we are today. For several years, Wildrose engaged in a bitterly partisan battle with the governing Progressive Conservatives. Wildrose was a grassroots reaction to the perceived lack of principles and a deviation from core fiscal conservative values on the part of the PCs. This core grievance caused Wildrose to evolve from a fringe party into a serious contender to defeat the PC dynasty. And in 2012, Wildrose almost did just that. To Wildrosers, the PCs had betrayed their most deeply held convictions about how governments should conduct themselves, living within their means, balancing the budget, staying out of debt, and adhering to high standards of transparency and accountability that Albertans expect. To PC activists and politicians, the idealists in Wildrose had been disloyal to the party and represented a narrow brand of conservative thought that was at odds with modern and mainstream Alberta. In my view, both sides had it a little bit right and a little bit wrong. The stakes in this battle were high. The winner would govern, and would govern the greatest province in the greatest country in the world. Add to that the charged emotions around betrayal and disloyalty, and the fact that everyone in the fight had known each other for years and years, and it's no wonder the conflict between Wildrose and the PCs got so heated and at times hurtful. Of course, we all know what happened. Wildrose came close in 2012, but the PCs held on. Wildrose was a fierce opposition and took out a second PC premier as the PCs reacted to significant Wildrose criticism and chose their third leader in 4 years, Jim Prentice. At that point, Wildrose leadership got tired of the fight and enticed by the promise of a quick and easy path to political power, they caved in to Jim Prentice and the PCs. And as we know, that really did not end up very well at all. Neither group won the power they were seeking. Albertans were so disgusted with it all, they ran into the arms of the NDP. That was certainly something neither Wildrose nor the PCs were expecting. I never expected it. Jim Prentice certainly never saw it coming. But it has landed us exactly where we are today. Nobody should be too surprised at what the NDP has done since. Since winning the election, they have clearly taken some significant steps, raising taxes, plans to hike the royalties, increasing regulations, and making it generally more difficult to be profitable is what NDP governments do. It is their standard game plan. In the 6 months since they formed government, the NDP has raised personal income taxes and raised business taxes. They are making a dramatic 50% increase to the minimum wage. They raised train fuel taxes, making it more expensive to move exports to market. They are even bringing in a massive new $3 billion carbon tax that will hurt almost every single business and household in Alberta. That includes hiking the price of gas at the pump by an extra 7 cents a litre, and of course, investment is fleeing Alberta as investors watch a pending royalty review that will see rates only go up. If you don't think it's truly bad, last week, in a moment of candor, our NDP energy minister mused that unemployed Alberta energy workers might consider looking for work in BC. Not acceptable. But here we are. We've got an NDP government that seems intent on making a bad economic situation far worse. Obviously, we've got a bit of a situation here. And to a whole bunch of Calgarians, the solution appears to be pretty simple. Unite. Unite the right. I've heard it all, and I've heard it from a lot of you. And thanks again for coming tonight. I hear clearly, bury the hatchet. Let bygones be bygones. Come together for a greater good. Let me first of all say to all of you that I agree. I agree. I believe that Conservatives are stronger and our cause is more powerful when we work together to achieve a common goal. I know that personally from my time working in Ottawa. But how do we get there? That is far more complicated. The future of the Progressive Conservative Association of Alberta is very much up in the air. Truly. I won't get into all of the gory details, but they are facing a complicated and dire financial situation that may make it impossible for them to go on. After everything our two parties have been through, there is truly some temptation in our camp to celebrate this. But, truth be told, it is a temptation I have resisted. I have deliberately chosen to look at it differently, and I've asked our party members to do the same. For too long, Wildrose has been brushed off as being too closed off to a broader vision of what it means to be a conservative. And I want that to end. The truth is, there is a whole bunch of good conservatives in this province who today don't believe they have a political home. They're very upset with the PCs. but aren't yet convinced about Wildrose. Maybe some of you in this room tonight would truly identify with that. I can't say that I blame you. You've only seen Wildrose under my leadership for a very short time. But just as I challenged our members to think differently about our party, I'm going to challenge you to do the same. Because this isn't the Wildrose party you might remember. Shortly after becoming leader, I was made aware of a mission statement our party had under previous leadership. It simply stated, quote, "to form government," unquote. When your singular purpose for existing is to win, you will do anything it takes to win. I think that in many ways, Wildrose was as single-minded as the PCs were. You could say their mission statement was also very short: to stay in power. What we saw with the floor crossing last December was what happens when two insufficient messages crash together. The reason for a political party to exist can't simply be to win. And when that party has won, it can't simply be to remain in power. The question we must confront is why? Why do we want to win? What are we trying to accomplish? What do we believe in? What will we do? I think that in finding agreement on these questions, we can put together a party that all conservatives in Alberta can support, and a party that will truly and faithfully serve all Albertans. Let me tell you about some of the things I believe in. I believe when the economy is hurting, you don't make things worse by adding new taxes and regulations on your number one job sector. I believe the best social program for any family is a good paying job and keeping more of their hard-earned money in their pockets and out of the hands of government. And I truly, truly believe the Premier of Alberta should never act embarrassed by their own province or campaign against pipelines that would create tens of thousands of high-paying jobs right here at home in Alberta. And I believe the Premier of Alberta should have a basic understanding of who we are, our culture, and our values in Alberta. Pretty shocking where we are today, isn't it? But let me give you another example. I am a true Democrat. Don't get excited. I do believe that the legislature should work. It should produce good laws for Albertans. Bill 6 is not a good law. There are so many things wrong with Bill 6. It is a big government solution in search of a problem. There's a few Bill 6 haters out there, I can tell already. It's bad law. It's very bad law. It's bad for Alberta. Everyone cares about farm safety, and no one cares more than the mums and dads who run Alberta's 45,000 farms and ranches. Nobody cares more than them. Do you know how I know that? Well, when you look at the fatality stats per 1,000 farmers right across the country, fewer people die on Alberta farms and ranches than die in other provinces which have far more regulation than Alberta. There is no province that has a better safety record than Alberta, and I'm proud of Alberta's farmers and ranchers. Are you? They do great work. Alberta farmers have a good OHS record, and most Alberta farmers carry insurance that is cheaper and better than WCB. You know, the government would actually know that if they had actually consulted with farmers and ranchers. You know, the very fact they don't ask Albertans is shocking. No consultation and pushing through legislation as quickly as possible. They should take the Democrat out of their party. Premier Notley says this issue has been studied too much. Well, she's right, because every single study says that at best, minor tweaks are needed. But the Premier is committed to a big government knows best approach to this, regardless of any evidence that we put in front of her. It shows a government and a Premier out of touch with Alberta values, values born right here in Canada's Stampede City. I'm proud of Calgary. I'm proud of Alberta. We have an incredible heritage. But Bill 6 is a mess. The national anthem singer for the Calgary Flames, George Canyon, knows it's a mess. Canadian country superstar Paul Brandt has spoken out against it, and if you haven't seen his letter, you should read it on Facebook. It's a great letter. Thanks, Paul. The entire Bill 6 process has been fundamentally un-Albertan, and it will cause anger that will last in Alberta for years, dividing Albertans. Bill 6 is a mess. And I am very proud of our Wildrose MLAs who have remained behind in Edmonton tonight to fight it for us. We don't really know when the government will cut off debate and force a vote. Most of our caucus isn't here tonight, as you've heard, because they are in Edmonton at the legislature, ready, willing, and able to debate Bill 6 as long as we can. That's the commitment we made to Albertans, and we will follow through with that commitment, I promise. I truly appreciate their efforts, and all of the MLAs from the Wildrose that are here today. I know everyone would like to be here, would love to be here with all of you, but they can't. Their job keeps them in Edmonton. Our MLAs who are here, myself included, will be driving back to Edmonton right after this. I have a speech at about 11:30 I'd like to make. And we will participate in the debate on Bill 6 if it's still going. It could go late into the night. We've had a couple of mornings it going up to and past 1 o'clock. That's how anxious the NDP is to push this bill through. They don't want oversight. They don't want consultation. They want to force their ideological agenda down Alberta's throat. It is possible that despite our best efforts and the anger of farmers and ranchers throughout Alberta, that Bill 6 will be rammed through tomorrow morning. It could be law by 10:15 a.m. with no consultation. If that happens, I promise you, the anger will be very real, and not just from the Wildrose Caucus, from all Albertans. Let's take a moment and look at the economic reality here in Alberta. Our primary industry already has one of the highest cost energy extraction industries in the world. It has been leveled by low oil and gas prices. To keep their heads above water, energy companies have responded by laying off more than 40,000 people so far this year. That number is only going up and doesn't even take into account the even larger amount of jobs lost indirectly. It's scary. So rather than adding to the pain and driving our employment numbers and EI claims even higher, government should be focused on the things it can do to help our job creators and economic drivers survive and prosper. Reduce and simplify taxes. Don't raise them or make them more complicated. Cut red tape. Don't regulate more. And look for fiscal and tax incentives that will stimulate the industry so it can stay competitive despite low oil prices. It makes sense. Every economist would tell you it makes sense. And let me be clear. Let me be perfectly clear. We don't hold the NDP accountable for the price of oil. We get that. But we do hold them accountable for how they've responded to the low price of oil. It's terrible. At a time when we can afford it the least, the NDP is going after those who the province needs the most. The people who pay taxes and create jobs. It's not right, it's not helpful, it's not the Alberta way. Finally, I believe in balancing the budget and staying out of debt. You might too. Was that just Jarrett clapping by himself, or did everybody participate in that? We have to balance the budget when the economy turns around. No one campaigned on balancing the budget this year or next year, but we have to start down the path to balance. We have to get off the path of adding debt year after year after year. And let's be clear, folks, Wildrose campaigned on a firm but modest reduction in spending. 2% on operations per year over the next 3 years. 2%. When you consider that we currently spend 20% more than BC, that's right, 20% more, $8 billion extra in operations alone every single year than British Columbia, shaving off $1 billion a year while protecting frontline services is a responsible and achievable goal. It is the right thing to do. It is the conservative thing to do. But what are the NDP proposing? Increasing spending even further, around 2.8% per year on operations, and waiting for oil prices to bail them out in 5 years? Absolutely shameful. Fiscal conservatives are often accused of being ideological when it comes to the budget. That somehow we're cold fiscal hawks that have little regard for government's obligations to its citizens. Poppycock. It's precisely because we believe in the continuation of core programs and services that we would strive to balance our budgets and stay out of debt. Let me explain. By 2017, Alberta taxpayers, that's you in the room, that's all of Albertans, will be paying $1.2 billion in debt servicing costs. $1.2 billion in debt servicing costs. That's just by itself. More than this year's entire budget for the Department of Agriculture and Forestry. More than their entire budget, just in interest payments. That's $1.2 billion that won't be spent on building schools, or hiring nurses, or repairing highways, or any of the other programs and services that Albertans rely on every single day and expect. That's money that will go straight from our wallets to the banks, just to keep the creditors off our back. By 2020, it will be twice as bad. Remember the 90s? I do. I remember the 80s. But in the 90s, debt in Alberta had risen to such levels that it required a major course correction and years of harsh spending cuts to get us back on our feet. That's why Alberta retiring the debt in 2004 was such an incredible achievement. It meant we were no longer held hostage by interest payments while our public services crumbled before our very eyes. It is a shame that those lessons have been so quickly forgotten. So it's not because of ideology that I believe in balancing the budget. It's because balancing the budget is the only way we can sustain a consistent level of public services over the long run. The same public services we all want and value. Now, these are the things I'm talking to Conservatives about these days. Conservatives in Calgary, in Edmonton, and right across the province. I think we've spent far too much time fighting old battles and settling old scores, and not nearly enough time talking about the many things we as Conservatives agree on. That's why I've encouraged my MLAs to work with the PCs on areas we can advance through cooperation. Yes, you heard right. Just yesterday, the PCs joined us in calling for an emergency debate on the impact that job losses are having on Albertans. It was denied. This kind of effort at cooperation would have been unheard of even 3 months ago. On the day we celebrated Manmeet Bhullar's life, Wildrose yielded its questions in question period to the PCs so that they would all get a chance to speak. For those of you that know what question period's like, giving up our questions was significant and no small feat. But it was the right thing to do. And I hope you're going to see more of this type of cooperation and outreach, because I believe it is what Alberta is looking for. Wildrose, under my leadership, will continue to reach out. Our constituency associations will offer to hold joint meetings with PC associations and talk about the principles and policies which might just unite us. How do you feel about that? Whew, I thought it was going to be a tough crowd there for a minute, but glad to hear that. Seriously, I will encourage our MLAs to actively engage with the PC associations in their ridings with the goal of finding and cultivating common ground. We will reach out because it is good for Alberta. We will reach out because we have been successful reaching out in the past. If you were to look at PC cabinet ministers from the Klein era, you would find as many or more of them in Wildrose than anywhere else. You would. I have heard loudly and clearly from Calgary, from all of Alberta, from all Albertans right across this province. Wildrose will not be accused of not trying to reach out pursuant to your instructions. We may not find a willing dance partner, but I promise you, we do have our dancing shoes on. I would bet that no matter what happens, there will be some stubborn folks at the top of the PC structure, or our structure, that hold on to the bitter end. And some in the PC party may just keep the PC name on the next election ballot. But my goal is to make every Conservative in Alberta, except the most bitter PC partisans, feel not only welcome to be in a room like this, always. I want them to feel compelled to be here because they will be with friends who will be deciding the future of Alberta, not dwelling on the past. I believe we owe it to Albertans to make our best effort to unite the right people and the right ideas, to give them a government that wants to rule for the right reasons and that is committed to creating a better Alberta for all Albertans. I truly, truly appreciate you all coming here tonight. Truly appreciate it, especially with what's gone on in the House over the past while. In closing, let me just say that I hope I've given you a few things to think about tonight. I hope I've challenged some of your perceptions about our party and maybe myself, and maybe even given those of you with doubts some reason to give us another look. We're not that scary. That was supposed to be funny. Most of all, I hope we can continue to have a fruitful conversation about building a consolidated Conservative coalition that is capable of winning the hearts and minds of Albertans. And I hope, I'll clap to that, I like that. Because that's what it's about. To govern effectively, to change Alberta for the better, we must capture the hearts and minds of Albertans. And I hope all of you will be a big part of it. Because the right people will form the next government in Alberta. And we need all the right people working together with the right ideas and the right principles to form the right government. Thank you so much for your time.